Hello students, welcome to our online video tutorial class. I think we have all seen the previous video on the chapter that is human reproduction. In the previous video we have discussed about the male reproductive system, and in this video I will be discussing about the female reproductive system. So let's start with the new topic. First, in the female reproductive system, we need to know whatever the portions are present within the female reproductive system. First of all, the female reproductive system is composed of following parts such as female reproductive unit, that is the ovary. Second, female reproductive tract, and that is composed of so many parts such as fallopian tube, uterus, cervix and vagina. Fourth part, that is the female external genitalia, and the last part, that is the female reproductive gland, that is composed of two type of glands. One is Bartholin gland and another one is mammary gland. So these are overall the classification of female reproductive system and its parts. Now we are just going for seeing the entire structure of the female reproductive system. This is the entire structure of the female reproductive system, where you can see the various parts of the female reproductive system and whatever the parts of the female reproductive system. First one is the ovary. This is the oval shaped structure and female reproductive unit, that is commonly known as ovary. And after the ovary, the next part is that is the oviduct or the fallopian tube. This is the fallopian tube portion. And fallopian tube has four different portions that I have shown you in this specific slide. That is, reproductive tract is entirely composed of fallopian tube, uterus, cervix and vagina. So this is the fallopian tube, this is the uterus, this is the cervix portion and this is the vaginal portion. So these four portions are present within the female reproductive tract. And with that, female external genitalia is present, which is actually present at the end of the vagina. And after that, there is a presence of the reproductive glands also. So obviously that is not shown here because those things will be discussed in the later slides. So overall here, the reproductive unit ovary, which are present on the both side, as well as the reproductive tract parts, those are getting very much clear here. Okay, next we are going for structure of ovary. First of all, the female reproductive unit, that is commonly known as ovary. Keep it in your mind, ovaries are the primary female sex organ. Keep it in your mind, ovaries are the primary female sex organs. Okay. Second, they produce female gametes or ovums. We all know that is the reproductive, in case of female specifically, the germ cell or the gamete which is produced, that is the ovum, and obviously that is produced by the help of ovary. Third, ovaries produce female sex hormones such as estrogen and progesterone. Obviously these two hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they are get produced by the help of this ovary. Okay, because within the ovary some specific follicular cells are present and they are responsible for producing this estrogen and progesterone. Next, the ovaries are located one on each side of the lower abdomen. Keep it in your mind, there are two ovaries are present and they are present on the both side or either side of the lower abdomen. Okay. Next, ovaries are connected with the pelvis wall and uterus by ligaments, that is called mesovarium. Keep it in your mind, these ovaries which are present in the lower abdomen, they are not free, rather they are attached with the pelvic wall as well as they are attached with the uterine lining by the help of ligaments. And obviously the ligaments which are actually present, which are responsible for binding this ovary with the uterine lining, that is called as, or those ligaments are called as mesovarium. Okay, so this is overall the structure of the ovary, you can see here in the photograph. Next we are going for structure of the ovary, that means internal structure of the ovary. If you see the internal structure of the ovary, you will see that each ovary is covered by a thin epithelium, and that is called as germinal epithelium, which encloses the ovarian stroma. Keep it in your mind, each ovary is covered by a thin epithelium and that is called as germinal epithelium, and this germinal epithelium enclosing the entire cytoplasmic part or stroma part of the ovary. Keep it in your mind, the stroma or the cytoplasmic part is subdivided into two zones or two portions. One is peripheral ovarian cortex and inner ovarian medulla. That means there are two portions, one is ovarian cortex, another one is ovarian medulla. So these two parts are actually present within the ovary. Third, ovarian cortex contains each stage of ovarian follicle. That means within the ovary there is a such kind of cell that is known as ovarian follicle, and the maturation of the ovarian follicle is taking place along the cortex portion of the ovary. So let's see whatever the types of ovarian follicles can be found. First of all, the germinal epithelial cells are producing the primordial follicles. I have already told the ovary is surrounded by the germinal epithelial cells. So that germinal epithelial cell is producing the first kind of follicular cell or follicle, that is the primordial follicle, or it is the basic follicular structure. This primordial follicle is producing further primary follicle, secondary follicle and tertiary follicle respectively. Because primordial follicle, when it will be getting matured, automatically these specific follicular structures are getting produced. Next, tertiary follicle gives birth of Graafian follicle. This is the mature ovarian follicle and that is produced from the tertiary follicle. So this is commonly known as tertiary follicle, this is commonly known as Graafian follicle, which is produced from the tertiary follicle by maturation. Next, Graafian follicle contains mature ovum. This is the next point, that Graafian follicle, when it is get produced, within the Graafian follicle only the ovum is present, and the ovum will be just releasing from the Graafian follicle, and the procedure by which it is releasing, that is commonly known as ovulation. Next point, Graafian follicle, just from the Graafian follicle the ovum will be releasing outside, that means ovulation has occurred, just the Graafian follicle will be get converted into corpus luteum. So corpus luteum is the next structure which is getting produced from Graafian follicle when the ovulation process has completed totally. At last, corpus luteum degenerates into ovarian stroma by forming corpus albicans. Keep it in your mind, this corpus luteum is commonly yellow in color, and when the corpus luteum it will be getting degenerated, on that time this corpus luteum structure will be getting converted into corpus albicans structure, and albicans is actually white in color, and by forming this corpus albicans, specifically the entire corpus luteum will be getting degenerated within the ovarian stroma. Okay, so these are the portions whatever we have discussed in this slide regarding the structure, internal structure of the ovary. Now we will be just seeing the diagram where the internal structure of the ovary has been shown. Here you can see this is the outer lining of the ovary, which is commonly known as the germinal epithelial cell layer. Keep it in your mind, from the germinal epithelial cell layer few specific follicles are getting produced. Those are the primary ovarian follicles, and before primary ovarian follicles, obviously primordial follicles are also taken birth from the germinal epithelial cell layer. So this primary ovarian follicle which has been produced, that will be producing further secondary ovarian follicle. This is the secondary ovarian follicle where the structure is getting bigger than the primary ovarian follicle. This secondary ovarian follicle is further getting converted into the tertiary ovarian follicle, or rather it can be called, or further getting matured into Graafian follicle. So this is the Graafian follicle structure whatever you can see here. So this is the Graafian follicle, and within that the ovum is present. This is the mature ovarian follicle. Now this Graafian follicle has converted into such a structure where you can see the ovum has been released from the Graafian follicle, and just after releasing the ovum, that means just after the ovulation process get completed, this specific Graafian follicle will be getting converted into a cell mass, and that cell mass is commonly known as corpus luteum. And keep it in your mind, this is yellow in color. Why yellow in color? Because due to presence of lutein granules. Due to presence of lutein granules, this specific color of the corpus luteum is yellow. Now corpus luteum, this specific is getting bigger, it is getting matured, and this corpus luteum will start forming the progesterone. And one more thing here I have missed, that is this specific primary, secondary, tertiary and Graafian follicles, when they are maturing gradually, these specific ovarian follicles are forming estrogen hormone as their product. Okay, and corpus luteum is producing the progesterone hormone as their product. This corpus luteum will be getting converted into corpus albicans, that is a white colored structure. This is the corpus albicans, and this corpus albicans will be getting degenerated totally within the ovarian stroma. Okay. So this is overall the circular process or cyclic process through which the ovarian follicular maturation as well as ovarian follicular degradation takes place within the structure of the ovary. Okay, and this is the mesovarium shown here through which the blood vessels have entered within the ovary structure. Now we are just going for the next slide, and in the next slide we will be discussing about specifically the structure of the Graafian follicle. So let's see. Graafian follicle, that is the mature ovarian follicle, whatever you have seen here. About that, when we will be start discussing, first of all we need to know that Graafian follicle is the most mature ovarian follicle. We already have discussed that. This specific follicle structure or the mature ovarian follicle contains external protective layers, and that is called as thecal layers. Keep it in your mind, the Graafian follicle is surrounded by a cellular layer. Obviously that layer is bilayered, but that cellular layer is commonly known as thecal layer, and this thecal layer is subdivided into two portions. One is theca externa, that is the external layer, another one is theca interna, that is the internal layer. Next, inside the thecal cell layer there is another cell layer obviously present, and that is also multiple layers are present, and those multiple layers containing the cellular layer which has been found or which is commonly found, that is called as membranous granulosa, or this is commonly known as granulosa cell layer, and it is attached with the membrane of the Graafian follicle. That's why it is known as membranous granulosa. Now if you enter within the Graafian follicle, there is a fluid filled space present, and that fluid filled cavity or the space is commonly known as antrum. So this is the portion where the fluid filled cavity present, that is known as antrum. Within the antrum, ovum is present, but ovum remain attached or associated with the granulosa cell layer by a stage-like structure which itself made up of granulosa cells, and that is called as cumulus oophorus. Keep it in your mind, ovum is associated with granulosa cell layers, and that is associated by a stage-like structure, and that stage-like structure itself, it is made up of granulosa cells, and that is known as cumulus oophorus. So this is the overall structure of the Graafian follicle. Let's see the structure in the diagram. This is the Graafian follicle structure. If you see the outer layers, they are commonly known as theca interstitial cells or thecal cells, and these theca interstitial cells are subdivided into two portions. One is outer layer, that is theca externa, and inner layer is commonly known as theca interna. This is the two layers of the thecal cell layer. Next, after thecal cell layer, there are 2 to 3 cell layers of granulosa cells present, and this granulosa cell is associated with the membrane of the Graafian follicle. That's why it is commonly known as membranous granulosa. So this is entirely the granulosa cell layers. Instead of granulosa cell layers within the Graafian follicle, there is a presence of a fluid filled cavity, and this fluid filled cavity is commonly known as antrum, and within the antrum, that specific fluid which is present, that is known as follicular fluid or liquor folliculi. So this is the entire fluid filled cavity, that is antrum. Next, there is a portion, there is a part, that is the female reproductive gamete or reproductive unit, you can say rather. This is the ovum. The ovum is not present freely within the antrum, rather this ovum is attached with the granulosa cell layer by a help of stage-like structure, and this stage-like structure is commonly known as cumulus oophorus, and this specific cumulus oophorus is also made up of granulosa cells. So on this specific cumulus oophorus, the ovum is actually present in resting condition. So this is overall the structure of the Graafian follicle, just we have discussed in the previous slide. I think we have all understood about the structure of the Graafian follicle. Now we are just entering within the female reproductive tract. Within female reproductive tract, the first part we need to study, that is the fallopian tube. Keep it in your mind, this is a tubular structure which can be found just after the ovary, or it is loosely connected with the ovary, as well as it is connected with the next portion of the female reproductive tract, that is uterus. The finger-like projections, these are the finger-like projections, whatever you can see, which are actually projected towards the ovary and which is responsible for accepting the ovum when the ovulation takes place. Then these specific finger-like projections are commonly known as fimbriae. These are commonly known as fimbriae. After fimbriae, there is a funnel-like portion. This red color portion is actually I am talking about. This is known as infundibulum. After infundibulum, there is a green colored elongated portion, and that portion is commonly known as, that is a wider portion rather, that is known as ampulla. And after ampulla, there is another portion by which the ampulla remain attached with the next female reproductive tract portion, that is uterus, and that is commonly known as isthmus. So overall, these are the four portions commonly found in case of fallopian tube. One is the finger-like projections, fimbriae, then presence of infundibulum, then presence of ampulla, and then at last the presence of isthmus. So these are the four portions we can see here. After fallopian tube, if we will go, then obviously the next portion of the female reproductive tract we can see, that is the uterus. What is that? The uterus is single and it is also called womb. Keep it in your mind, uterus is only known as womb because the growth of the fetus takes place within this. The shape of the uterus is like an inverted pear. That means it is actually, if you see the shape properly of the uterus, it is looking like a pear, but it is inverted one. It is not the straight one. It is supported by ligaments attached to the pelvic walls. Keep it in your mind, this uterus is attached with the pelvic walls, and obviously that is by the help of ligaments. Next, the wall of the uterus is composed further of three layers. Whatever the three layers are present, the external membranous layer, that is known as perimetrium. The middle thick layer, that is known as myometrium, because this is exclusively made up of muscles, and inner glandular layer, and that is commonly known as endometrium. So these are the three layers: outer membranous layer, that is perimetrium; middle thick and muscular layer, that is myometrium; and inner glandular layer, that is known as endometrium. Now, endometrium undergoes cyclic changes during menstrual cycle. The endometrium exhibits strong contraction during delivery of the baby. Keep it in your mind, endometrium, in case of endometrium region, the cyclic changes can be found during the process of menstrual cycle, and contraction and the relaxation of the endometrium are commonly helping in the delivery of the baby or delivery of the newborn fetus. Uterus has two portions. One is the upper portion, that is the fundus portion. This is the fundus portion, and this is the middle portion, that is the body of the uterus. And there are three layers are also shown here: the internal layer, that is endometrium, then the muscular layer, that is myometrium, and outer layer, that is the perimetrium. So these are the three layers, as well as there is a presence of upper portion, that is fundus, and the lower portion, that is, or the middle portion, that is uterine cavity or uterine canal. So this is the overall structure of the uterus shown here. Next, we are going for the next female reproductive tract portion and the last two portions. And in these portions, you can see here the cervix and vagina. Both of the portions have been shown. So in the cervix and vagina portion, first of all, we need to know that the uterus opens into the vagina through a canal-like structure, and that is commonly known as cervical canal. Here you can see the after the uterus, whatever the canal-like portion is can be seen here, that is the cervical canal. This is actually the cervical canal portion. Keep it in your mind, this cervical canal contains the internal opening as well as external opening. Those are commonly known as internal and external os, or internal and external orifice. Okay, and by the internal os or opening, the cervical canal is connected with the uterus, and by external orifice or by external os, the cervical canal is connected with the vaginal canal or vaginal area. Vagina is quite more broader area, broader canal than the obviously than the cervix, because cervical canal or cervix region is very narrower portion. It is obviously broader. Vagina also contains the canal, that is vaginal canal, and vagina opens outside through a aperture, that is vaginal aperture or vaginal orifice. Okay, in this figure you can see this is the vagina portion, and it is opening outside through the vaginal opening or vaginal orifice, and that vaginal orifice is obviously present within the female external genitalia portion, and that is known as vulva. Vagina also can be called as birth canal. Why? Because through this vaginal canal the birth of the newborn baby takes place. That's why it is commonly known as birth canal. Okay. So this is overall the structure of the cervix and vagina. Next we are going for female external genitalia. This is the female external genitalia, that is the last portion, not the last portion, this is the third portion of the female reproductive system. And in this female external genitalia you can see this female external genitalia can be also known as vulva. And keep it in your mind, this female external genitalia is composed of so many parts. First part is that mons pubis. What is that? This is a cushion of fatty tissue which is covered by the skin and pubic hair. And keep it in your mind, this is present anteriorly to the female external genitalia. So I am just showing you the figure. Suppose this is the female external genitalia. So the anterior portion of the female external genitalia, that means this portion which is fleshy and which is containing hairs also. So that portion is commonly known as mons pubis. Clear? Next, labia majora. This is the portion where the fleshy skin fold are present on the both side of the vulva, which extends down from the mons pubis and surrounds the vaginal opening. So here you can see that is the labia majora. This portion I am just showing you, this is the portion and this is the portion. These two portions are commonly known as labia majora. These are the skin folds which are starting from the mons pubis region and extended up to lower portion. And keep it in your mind, these skin folds are exclusively responsible for covering the female external genitalia, or rather you can say the vulva. Labia minora, these are paired fold of tissues under labia majora. So if this is the labia majora, obviously you can see this is the skin fold. This skin fold I am talking about and this skin fold I am talking about. These two folds are commonly known as labia minora, and this specific labia minora are responsible for protecting the vulva with labia majora. Okay. Hymen is the opening of the vagina and which is often covered by this membrane, that is called as hymen. This membrane can be torn during the first coitus, but in case of some female it gets torn due to the physical exercise also. And obviously keep it in your mind, we have a superstition or we have a such kind of belief that hymen is actually the symbol of virginity, but it is not the reliable indicator of the virginity, because sometimes in case of some of the female who are cycling, who are doing the weightlifting, as well as who are involved in the various kinds of athletics, so for those female this membrane hymen can be torn due to excessive physical exercise. So for that reason obviously they have not lost their virginity, and obviously this is not a symbol of virginity. So keep it in your mind, I am showing you the hymen. This is the hymen portion, this is the membranous portion which is commonly known as hymen, this portion. And this portion is exclusively responsible for covering the vaginal opening, and this hymen is responsible for what I say, it is not, we are not considering them as a virginity indicator. Okay. Last portion is the clitoris. Clitoris is a tiny finger-like projection which is homologue to the male penis, lies at the upper junction of the two labia minora above the urethral opening. So here the urethral opening is also there within the vulva region, and above the urethral opening there is a small projection which is actually present in the junction of the labia minora, and this specific small finger-like projection which is found in the junction of the upper portion of the labia minora, this portion is homologous to the male penis. The function till yet it is not properly clear to us, but it is present above the urethral canal or above the urethral orifice or urethral aperture. So this is overall the structure of the vulva or the female external genitalia. Presence of the mons pubis, presence of labia majora, presence of labia minora, and after that the vulva portion, and within that the urethral opening is present, and then there is a presence of membranous portion, that is the hymen, and at the lower portion there is a vaginal aperture or vaginal orifice is also present, and at the junction of the labia minora there is a presence of finger-like projection which is commonly known as clitoris or clitoris. Okay, so this is overall the female external genitalia structure has been covered. Next we are going for discussing about the female reproductive gland. First of all, in this female reproductive gland slide we will be discussing about the Bartholin gland, and after that we will be discussing about the mammary gland, because the mammary gland structure I will be showing you in the next slide. So first of all, we need to know about what is Bartholin gland. Bartholin gland is are the two pea-sized glands located slightly posterior and to the left and right of the opening of the vagina. So the vaginal opening which is present on the left and right of the vaginal opening of this Bartholin gland is present. Keep it in your mind, it is secreting mucus like lubricating fluid within the vagina, and obviously for that reason the inner layer or inner wall of the vagina gets slippery. And keep it in your mind, this is actually homologous to the bulbourethral gland or the Cowper's gland present in the male, which is providing the motility to the sperm. The same motility will be provided by this Bartholin gland, which are present on the both side of the labia minora, okay, or in the both side of the opening of the vaginal aperture. Next, after Bartholin gland, we can see there is another gland, and that gland is commonly known as mammary gland. We all know that after production of the baby is obtaining their food or the milk obviously from this gland. So for that reason this gland has been also introduced, or it will be also incorporated within the female reproductive gland. So let's see the structure of the mammary gland. First of all, the mammary glands are paired structure that contains the glandular tissue and variable amount of fat. So I am just going to the next slide to show you that whatever the portions. So these are the fats, these are the pink color portion, these are the fats which are present within the mammary gland and which is actually responsible for giving the fleshy structure. Next, there is also presence of epithelial cells, and these specific epithelial cells are mammary alveolus or mammary alveoli. These specific structures are exclusively responsible for the milk synthesis and milk secretion both. Each mammary gland contains 15 to 20 mammary lobes. Keep it in your mind, within the mammary gland 15 to 20 mammary lobes are present, within which these mammary alveoli cells are present. And those are containing the cluster of cells, and those are known as alveoli. So keep it in your mind, within the mammary lobes 15 to 20 mammary lobes are present, and within that the cluster of cells are present which are commonly known as alveoli. Alveoli secrete milk which remains stored within the lumen of alveoli. Another more important point is that those mammary alveoli cell or alveolar epithelial cells, they are secreting milk which remains stored within the lumen of the alveoli. Lumen of the alveoli means from the alveoli if you come out, you will see that there is a lumen like structure, and within those lumen the milk remains stored temporarily. And the alveoli open into mammary tubules. Keep it in your mind, here the mammary tubules are also shown properly from the mammary gland alveolar cells. The tubules which are actually coming out, those are commonly known as mammary tubules. Okay, so the mammary tubules are also present, and the tubules of each lobe join to form the mammary duct. In the figure also you can see properly, this is the mammary duct, and this mammary duct is actually formed by what? This mammary duct is formed by the mammary tubules which are coming from various mammary lobes. Okay. After formation of mammary duct, several mammary ducts join to form a wider mammary ampulla. Keep it in your mind, these specific mammary ducts are getting joined with each other and forming a portion that is called as swollen portion, that is called as ampulla. This portion I am showing in the figure. So this is the mammary ampulla. So in the mammary ampulla also the milk remains stored for the temporary time, and it is connected with the lactiferous duct. That means after mammary ampulla you can see so many ducts are actually going outside and they are opening outside through the nipple, and those ducts are commonly known as lactiferous duct, and these ducts, through them the mammary gland, from the mammary gland the milk is coming out. So there is a mammary alveoli cells which are present within the mammary lobes which are now 15 to 20 in number. Keep it in your mind, with the mammary lobes obviously there is a presence of mammary lumen, where the milk which is synthesized by the mammary alveoli, they are coming into the lumen. From the lumen it is coming to the next portion, and the next portion is the mammary duct. How it has been formed? Mammary duct has been formed by uniting so many lumens coming out from the mammary lobes, and those lumens are, when they are connected, those specific mammary ducts which are, when they are connected with each other, they are forming a structure that is known as ampulla portion, and after ampulla is a swollen portion, and after ampulla from there so many ducts are going out through the nipple, and that is known as lactiferous duct. So this is overall the structure of the mammary gland, whatever it is discussed here. Next, there is a point, there is the steps of oogenesis. That means we will be discussing about oogenesis process. In the oogenesis process, first of all we can see it is also like spermatogenesis, starting from the germinal epithelial cells. Keep it in your mind, germinal epithelial cells which are actually surrounding the ovary. This epithelial cell is performing the mitosis cell division, and after mitosis cell division these germinal epithelial cells are producing oogonial cells. These oogonial cells are further entering within the growth phase, and by entering within the growth phase obviously they are increasing their size and forming the primary oocyte. Now the primary oocyte which has been formed, that will be further getting divided into two portions. One is secondary oocyte and another one is a primary polar body, and obviously this division has occurred by the help of meiosis cell division, that is meiosis 1. Keep it in your mind, up to primary oocyte the number of chromosome is diploid at 2n, but after just primary oocyte the number of chromosome has come to n, and obviously for that reason secondary oocyte and primary polar body both are containing n number of chromosome. Now secondary oocyte will be getting further divided again by the help of the meiosis 2 cell division, and they are producing the ovum and secondary polar body. Keep it in your mind, ovum and secondary polar body both are produced by the help of meiosis 2 cell division. Primary polar body also gets divided by the meiosis 2 cell division, and they are producing secondary polar bodies. Now these secondary polar bodies 3 which are produced, they are getting degenerated within the ovary. Only ovum remains active because ovum is considered as a gamete, and that will be responsible or that will be involved in the fertilization process. Now one point I want to share with you, that is secondary oocyte, when it is divided by the meiosis 2 cell division and they are forming ovum and secondary polar body, on that time keep it in your mind, the secondary oocyte is get fertilized by the sperm, and after that only this meiosis 2 takes place. Without fertilization of the secondary oocyte by the sperm, obviously this ovum and secondary polar body will not produced. So automatically we can say that in case of female, when the fertilization of the secondary oocyte doesn't take place, on that time secondary oocyte only it will be get released during the time of menstruation. Clear? During the time of menstrual cycle. But if the secondary oocyte is fertilized by the sperm, then only the meiosis 2 cell division starts, and after starting that ovum and secondary polar body we will be obtaining. And the secondary polar bodies which are getting produced by the meiosis 2 cell division, obviously they will be get degenerated within the ovarian stroma. Clear? So this is overall the oogenesis procedure. Here you can see entire oogenesis procedure I have shown. This is the germinal epithelial cell or primordial germ cell, 44x chromosome containing, and it is actually getting divided into multiple oogonium by the help of mitosis cell division. Now oogonial cells are getting enlarged because their growth has occurred and forming primary oocyte. Primary oocyte is getting further divided into secondary oocyte and first polar body. You can see here the primary oocyte which has been divided by transmeiotic division. Obviously they are now haploid number of chromosome containing cell. This secondary oocyte will be getting further divided into ovum and the second polar body or secondary polar body, as well as this first polar body also will be getting further divided to form the secondary polar body. And out of these three, all these three polar bodies, secondary polar bodies will be get degenerated. Only one that remains ovum in a form of ovum, that will remain only active. And already I have told, if the secondary oocyte will be get fertilized by the sperm, on that case only the secondary meiotic division takes place and the ovum will be get formed. Otherwise the secondary oocyte will be get released only during the time of menstrual cycle. Is it clear? I think everyone. So we are going for the next slide, and in the next slide it is showing actually about the structure of the ovum. What is about the structure of the ovum? In the structure of the ovum you can see it is the female reproductive unit, or rather the gamete of the female reproductive system, that is ovum. Keep it in your mind, the ovum is surrounded by a layer of granulosa cells, and that layer or that specific layer is commonly known as corona radiata layer. Next, the ovum has itself two coverings, such as one is zona pellucida, that is the outer covering, and another one is the inner covering, that is the vitelline membrane. Keep it in your mind, these two specific coverings, zona pellucida and vitelline membrane, they are separated from each other by the help of a space that is known as perivitelline space. So this is the another important information what we need to remember, that outside there is a presence of the layer that is the zona pellucida, inside there is a layer that is the vitelline envelope. And keep it in your mind, both of these envelopes or both of these specific membranes are separated from each other by a space that is the perivitelline space. Next, if you enter within the ovum, there is a cytoplasmic portion, and that is known as ooplasm. And after that, within the ovum there is a presence of own nucleus, as well as nucleolus. So this is overall the structure of the ovum, or rather you can say the structure of the secondary oocyte. Both are same. So here you can see the structure of the ovum or the structure of the secondary oocyte. So these are the follicular cells or granulosa cells which are present outside, which are providing protection to the ovum structure, and these cells are commonly known as granulosa cell layer, or it can be called as chronoradiata. Now this is the ovum structure, and outside of the ovum, that is a membrane that is commonly known as zona pellucida. Inner layer is commonly known as vitelline membrane or plasma membrane. In between these two, zona pellucida and vitelline membrane, there is a space that is known as perivitelline space. Now if we enter within the ovum also there is a cytoplasmic portion that is known as ooplasm, and except that there is a presence of the ovum nucleus, okay, as well as the nucleolus. So this is the overall structure of the ovum, whatever I have discussed in the previous slide. Now we have reached to the last portion of the female reproductive system, and the last portion of the female reproductive system, that is the most important portion, and that is the menstrual cycle. What is that? Let's start. The reproductive cycle in the female primate mammal is commonly called as menstrual cycle, but we need to know why it is called menstrual cycle. The reason is the menstruation or the bleeding, it is actually happening at the initial time of the menstrual cycle. That means the menstrual cycle is starting with menstruation or bleeding. So for that reason the name has been given, that is the menstrual cycle. Keep it in your mind, this menstrual cycle is commonly starting in the age of puberty or in the age of adolescence, and that is commonly the starting process of the menstrual cycle is commonly known as menarche. Next, the menstrual cycle sustains for 28 days almost, and this is the entire time period of the menstrual cycle. Keep it in your mind, ovum releases during each menstrual cycle. Keep it in your mind, each and every ovum, they are getting matured and they are getting released during each and every menstrual cycle. Next, in human beings, the menstrual cycle ceases around 50 years of age in case of female. Nowadays it is 45 to 50. So in which specific age the menstrual cycle is get ceased, or it will be get stopped or prohibited, that specific process of inhibition of the menstrual cycle is commonly known as menopause. Next, cyclic menstruation is an indicator or normal reproductive phase and extends between the menarche and menopause. So keep it in your mind, menstruation or the menstrual cycle, which is a cyclic process you can see here, that is obviously should be present in between the time period of menarche and menopause. That means starting from the puberty up to the age of 45 to 50, this entire time within each and every month for 28 days this menstrual cycle will be running. Now we are going for the further elaboration of the menstrual cycle. Here we have segregated the menstrual cycle into two different cycles, because during the menstruation or during the menstrual cycle, changes are happening in the ovary as well as changes are taking place within the uterus also. So for that reason we have separated as a ovarian cycle as well as uterine cycle. So let's start with the ovarian cycle. First of all, see carefully within the ovary whatever the phases can be found during the menstrual cycle. The phases which are commonly found within the during the menstrual cycle within the ovary, that is, first one, that is the menstruation, second one, that is the follicular phase, third one, that is the ovulatory phase, and fourth one, that is the luteal phase. So let's see. First one, menstruation. That means always keep it in your mind, the menstrual cycle will be starting with the bleeding or menstruation, and first 5 to 6 days this specific menstruation or the bleeding, it will be continuously happening in the ovarian cycle. Second phase is the follicular phase. Follicular phase is happening what? It is starting from 5 to 6 days and it will be continuing up to 13 days. So keep it in your mind, this specific phase is commonly known as follicular phase. Keep it in your mind, during this follicular phase, the follicular maturation will be continuously happening within the ovary. That means starting from primordial follicle or primary follicle, the formation of the Graafian follicle takes place within this specific ovary. And not only that, in this time, in this follicular phase, the FSH hormone level within the blood, that is very high or it is gradually increasing, as well as the follicular maturation is taking place within the ovary. So for that reason, estrogen level also gradually increases. Up to which day? Up to 13th day. So up to 13th day, FSH and estrogen level continuously will be increasing in this phase, follicular phase. After follicular phase, the next phase which is coming, that is the ovulatory phase. Keep it in your mind, this ovulatory phase is only the 14th day. Why? Because after 13th day, ovum is getting released from the mature Graafian follicle. And keep it in your mind, for releasing the ovum from the Graafian follicle, obviously that process is known as ovulation. And another more important point is that for ovulation, which hormone is actually helping? That is the hormone which is releasing from the anterior pituitary, that is the luteinizing hormone, that is taking part in this ovulation process. And during the day of ovulation, actually the LH concentration in the blood is getting maximum. So for that reason, it is commonly known as ovulatory phase. Next, after ovulation, what is actually getting started? That is the luteal phase. That means the formation of the corpus luteum, it will start. And obviously luteal phase extends from the 15th day onwards up to 28th day. That is the last day of the menstrual cycle. So in this time, corpus luteum is forming, and obviously from the corpus luteum, progesterone hormone secretion, it will start. That means just after the ovulation phase, the progesterone level in the blood, it will start increasing, and after that it will be reduced also. And another more important thing is that corpus luteum degradation also it will be get started in this time. And we all know when the corpus luteum is getting degraded, automatically it is forming corpus albicans, that is a white in color, and corpus luteum is yellow in color. So corpus albicans which are getting formed, that will be further producing, or that will be further getting degraded within the ovary by forming the corpus albicans. Next, we will be entering within the uterine cycle also. In the uterus also some of the changes can be found during this menstrual cycle. So let's see whatever the changes can be found during this menstrual cycle. First of all, that is the menstruation. Keep it in your mind, during the menstruation, obviously the bleeding or menstruation which is taking place, actually this bleeding or the menstruation is happening from where? Actually it is happening from the uterine lining or inner layer of uterus, that is the endometrium. The uterine glands, blood vessel, entire wall of the uterus, that is endometrium, entirely those are get shedded off during this specific menstruation process. And within this menstruation process also, the ovum which has been released during the ovulatory phase of the previous menstrual cycle, so that ovum also will be getting released with the blood as well as the portion of the endometrium. So this phase, that's why the name has been given menstruation, and that is 1st to 5th or 6th day. Next, proliferative phase. This is also starting from 5th, 6th day onwards up to 13th day. Keep it in your mind, from the name we can understand here the proliferation of the endometrial lining of the uterus takes place. And keep it in your mind, blood vessel, uterine gland formation, these all things start happening from this phase, that is the proliferative phase. That is the proliferation of the uterine lining has been occurred. Next, ovulatory phase, same thing whatever I have told in case of ovarian cycle, it is happening on the 14th day. And keep it in your mind, the release of the ovum is happening in this phase. And another most important thing is that LH helps in this phase, specifically for this ovulation. And during the time of ovulation, LH concentration in the blood, it will be increasing a lot, and that is known as LH surge. Next, secretory phase is also there. Secretory phase is another phase, that is the last phase, 15th to 28th day duration. In this phase, entire endometrium lining has grown fully or completed their growth, and that on that time secreted in this phase, actually the uterine lining or the endometrium is very much ready for further shedding off. Because further in the next menstruation, this layer which has been produced in the proliferative phase specifically, as well as in the few time of the secretory phase also, that will be get shedded off. And for that reason, this portion, this phase, that is the secretory phase, is very much important, because it is already ready for the next menstruation, because the growth of the endometrial lining has been totally completed. Now just we will be going for the next slide, where I will be showing you, this is the ovarian cycle. The follicular maturation has been shown, the primordial follicle, then primary follicle, secondary follicle, tertiary follicle, and then Graafian follicle. From there the ovum has been released, that is ovulation. Then it is getting converted into corpus luteum structure. Then corpus luteum is getting converted into corpus albicans. So this is overall the ovarian cycle which is happening within the ovary. During this ovarian cycle, if you see the levels of the anterior pituitary hormones, you can see this specific level. You can see rather the level of the FSH. Okay, level of the FSH is getting increased during this 13th or 14th day. Here it is shown actually on the 14th day, but rather I can say that FSH level it will be showing little bit beforehand. On the 13th day you will be showing the follicular stimulating hormone level maximum, because 13th day up to that the Graafian follicle sustains. On the 14th day Graafian follicle structure is start degrading. So for that reason on the 13th day only the Graafian follicle will be releasing the maximum quantity of the follicular stimulating hormone. With the follicular stimulating hormone on the 14th day specifically, you can keep it in your mind that LH hormone's concentration will be maximum. It will be showing the peak, that is commonly known as LH surge, and we all know this specific LH or luteinizing hormone is responsible for further ovulation, so that the ovum will be releasing out from the Graafian follicle. So this FSH level, FSH peak it will be showing on the day of 13th, and LH peak it will be showing on the day of 14th, and after that FSH and LH both levels will be coming down. And from initial time you have seen the FSH level is gradually increasing, but before 13th day it has just come down once, and on the 13th day they have shown one small peak. In case of LH also same thing. From initial time LH is present in a almost at in equilibrium line, and on the 14th day suddenly they have increased, they have formed a peak, or that has been formed a peak, and then again come down. Next, if you will go for the ovarian hormone, you will see the estrogen and progesterone, both of the hormones. Here also you can see, starting from the first day when the follicular phase is going on, estrogen level or estradiol level is increasing gradually. On the 13th day this estradiol or estrogen will be showing the maximum peak, because the concentration of the estrogen is getting maximum on this day. After 13th day the estradiol or estrogen will be start coming down, and again on the day of almost in the luteal phase, almost in the 23rd 24th day, this estrogen level it will be start increasing again. Why? Because corpus luteum on that time it was present within the ovary, and that corpus luteum obviously that will be secreting progesterone, but with that a small quantity of the estrogen also they can release. So for that reason estrogen level will be again increasing during the luteal phase, and after luteal phase it will be just dropping down. But if you see the progesterone, up to 14th day there is no peak, there is no increase of the progesterone. After 14th day just the corpus luteum structure will be getting formed. From then the progesterone peak, or the peak of the progesterone, it will be start hiking, or that just start increasing. In the luteal phase entirely the progesterone has shown a higher peak, and after just this luteal phase gets over, this progesterone level is getting reduced. Because keep it in your mind, during the luteal phase also the maturation of the endometrial lining is taking place, and the maturation of the endometrial lining, which is maximum happens during this luteal phase, that is controlled by this progesterone. So for that reason progesterone level should be higher. So this is overall the ovarian hormone fluctuation during this menstrual cycle. In case of uterine cycle, you can see here already I have told the first phase is menstruation, that means the menstrual wall or the endometrial wall, the uterine wall or the endometrial wall is getting totally degraded on the first 5 days or 6 days, that means during the menses. After that, when the proliferative stage starts, that means which is the second part of the follicular phase, on that time the wall formation of the endometrium it is getting started, and you can see here the height of the endometrial wall is increasing gradually, and with that the blood vessels as well as uterine gland formation has been also started. Next, after 14th day's ovulation, when the uterus is entering within the secretory phase, and in this phase it is actually has to be very much clear that the wall of the uterus or the wall of the uterus, that is endometrium, is getting so much thicker day by day, hour by hour. That means the thickness of the endometrial lining is gradually increasing, and not only the thickness, with that endometrial lining, uterine gland as well as the blood vessels are also getting distributed towards each and every portion of this endometrial lining. That means the endometrial lining is getting its full grown structure. After getting this full grown structure, after again 28 days when the next cycle it will start, that full grown structure which has been produced during the secretory phase of the uterus, that specific endometrial lining again start degrading. Again the wall height or a wall length it will be getting degraded or shedded due to rupturing due to shedding off of the uterine lining or endometrium. So this is entirely the menstrual cycle changes. This is the ovarian changes, these are the uterine changes. With that, hormonal changes of the anterior pituitary, FSH and LH, and hormonal changes of ovary, that is estrogen and progesterone, and in which time these hormones are actually showing peak. I think you have understood properly this entire question. So this is the graphical representation which need to be practiced in a proper manner, because regarding this the questions are all coming in the boards as well as in the medical exam. So with this specific slide we have finished the female reproductive system, and I think each and every point of the female reproductive system you have listened very carefully and you have understood also properly, and I think you have enjoyed this video a lot. So thank you everyone for listening this video. Thanks a lot.